She was alone, deep in the heart of the jungle. Every shadow, every sound sent shivers down her spine. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and leaves, the distant cries of unseen creatures echoing through the trees. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps as she took another cautious step forward, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. Then a sound, low, guttural, and deep. Her body froze. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as a presence loomed before her. Slowly, she turned her head, her pulse hammering against her ribs. And there he was, a towering figure, cloaked in dense black fur, standing motionless in the dappled light. His broad chest rose and fell with steady, powerful breaths, his dark, intelligent eyes locked onto hers. He was massive, unlike anything she had ever seen, and in that moment, fear gripped her like a vice. Her fingers clenched into trembling fists as the beast took a single step forward. The ground beneath her vibrated with his weight. His nostrils flared, a deep rumble reverberating from his chest. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he could hear it. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to turn and disappear into the jungle. But she couldn't move. His gaze held her there, pinned in place like prey beneath the eyes of a predator. A sharp grunt escaped his throat, low and guttural, sending a fresh wave of terror through her. His lips curled slightly, revealing long, glistening canines. She sucked in a sharp breath, bracing herself for what was coming. But he didn't lunge. He didn't charge. Instead, he simply watched her, studying her with an intensity that sent chills through her body. The fear still pulsed in her veins, but something else was beginning to stir beneath it. Something unfamiliar, something she couldn't yet name. And in that moment she wondered, what if he wasn't the monster she thought he was? What if this was only the beginning of something incredible? Lily had always dreamed of working with animals, but nothing had prepared her for this. Fresh out of university, she had eagerly signed up for a wildlife research program deep in the heart of the jungle. She had imagined peaceful days observing creatures in their natural habitat, taking notes and contributing to conservation efforts. But the moment she arrived, reality hit her like a storm. The jungle was wild, unpredictable, and utterly unforgiving. The air was thick and humid, clinging to her skin. Every sound was foreign. Every rustling leaf sent her senses into overdrive. And then there were the gorillas, the true rulers of this land. The first time she heard the name Koba, it was spoken in hushed, reverent tones. He was the largest silverback in the region, a legend among researchers and locals alike. Some admired him, others feared him. He was known for his intelligence, his strength, and his unpredictable nature. Tales of his encounters with humans varied. Some said he had once chased a poacher for miles. Others whispered that he had once stood mere inches from a researcher and stared him down until the man fled in terror. To the jungle, he was king. To Lily, he was an enigma. She had seen him from a distance on her first day, a dark shadow moving through the trees, his presence commanding without effort. The other gorillas followed him without question, their loyalty absolute. But Lily knew that trust with a silverback was not given freely. She would have to earn it. And that was easier said than done. The rules of the jungle were clear. Never approach too quickly. Never make direct eye contact. Never show fear. But how could she not be afraid? Koba was massive. His sheer size alone was enough to make her question if she truly belonged here. The other researchers assured her that, in time, she would learn his ways. But Lily wasn't sure time was on her side. Because the moment she stepped into his territory, she felt it. That primal, unspoken understanding that she was an outsider. And Koba? He was watching her. The jungle was alive with sound, but all Lily could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. She had been following the research team, carefully navigating the dense undergrowth, when suddenly the air shifted. A heavy presence filled the space around her, thick and unyielding. The others stopped moving. A hush fell over the group. Then, from the shadows, he emerged. Koba. His massive frame moved effortlessly through the trees, his dark eyes scanning the intruders in his domain. Lily barely had time to react before he stopped just a few feet away, his nostrils flaring as he took in her scent. He was even bigger up close, his sheer size overwhelming, his muscled body radiating an undeniable power. She had studied gorillas, read about their behavior, their warning signs. And right now, Koba was sending a message. A deep, rumbling sound rose from his chest, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. Then, in one swift motion, he lunged forward. The earth shook as he pounded his fists against the ground, a display of dominance that sent shockwaves through her body. Her breath caught in her throat, every nerve in her body screaming at her to run. "Don't move!" The voice came from behind her, one of the senior researchers, barely above a whisper. Lily wanted to obey, but her body betrayed her. Her instincts kicked in, her foot shifted back, just an inch, just enough to signal fear. Koba's eyes locked onto the movement instantly. Another powerful grunt, sharper this time. His massive hands clenched. Lily's fingers curled into fists at her sides, forcing herself to stay still. She couldn't look him in the eye. That would be a challenge. She couldn't turn her back. That would be an insult. All she could do was breathe, remain small, and pray that he would lose interest. The moment stretched on endlessly. Koba exhaled sharply, the heat of his breath rolling over her skin. Then, just as quickly as he had approached, he huffed and turned, disappearing back into the thick green shadows. Lily's body sagged with relief, but her mind raced. She had seen something in his eyes before he left. Not just power, not just dominance, but something deeper, something curious. He had tested her, and she had survived. But this was only the beginning. The next time she crossed his path, she knew she wouldn't just be an observer. She would have to prove herself. Days passed, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling of Koba's eyes watching her, even when he wasn't there. Every morning, she ventured into the jungle with the research team, careful to follow protocol, keeping her distance, avoiding direct confrontation. But no matter how cautious she was, Koba always seemed to sense her presence. Sometimes she would catch glimpses of him between the trees, still, unmoving, observing. Other times, she would hear his deep, rumbling breaths before she ever saw him. He wasn't just watching. He was testing her. Despite her training, Lily struggled to connect with the gorillas. The others in Koba's group barely tolerated her, shifting away when she came too close, casting wary glances in her direction. She knew she had to earn their trust, but how? She was an outsider in their world, an intruder. And Koba made sure she never forgot that. One afternoon, she found herself too close. She hadn't realized it at first. She was too focused on her notebook, jotting down observations, when suddenly a low growl rumbled through the air. She looked up. Koba was there, watching, waiting, and then, without warning, he moved. Lily's breath caught as Koba charged. He wasn't running at full speed, but it was enough to send a clear message. Leaves scattered, branches snapped beneath his massive hands as he pounded toward her. The ground trembled. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She forced herself to remember what she had been taught. Running meant death. Running meant she was prey. So she stayed rooted to the ground, lowering herself slightly, making herself smaller but not weak. She avoided his eyes, tilting her head slightly downward in submission. Then, silence. Koba stopped just a foot away, his enormous chest rising and falling, his nostrils flaring. He could crush her in an instant, but he didn't. Instead, he let out a short, huffing breath. Another test, another warning. Lily swallowed hard, keeping her breathing steady. And then, slowly, Koba turned and walked away. The tension in the air eased, but Lily knew it wasn't over. He had spared her today. But tomorrow he might not be so forgiving. She had to find another way, a way to show him she wasn't a threat, a way to prove she belonged. Lily knew she couldn't force trust. She had to earn it. Day after day, she returned to the jungle, careful, patient, watching the gorillas as they watched her. She studied their movements, their sounds, their unspoken rules, and slowly, she began to change the way she moved, the way she existed in their world. She mimicked their behavior, lowering her gaze, sitting still instead of fidgeting, making herself part of the landscape rather than an intruder. And Koba noticed. At first, he remained distant, his dark eyes unreadable, but he no longer charged at her. He no longer saw her as an immediate threat. It was progress, but fragile, delicate, like walking a tightrope over a canyon. One misstep, and everything could crumble. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. A small opportunity, but one that could change everything. She had spent hours sitting nearby, silent, unmoving, when one of the younger gorillas, a curious juvenile, began inching toward her. The little one tilted its head, sniffing the air cautiously. Lily held her breath, resisting the urge to react. Every muscle in her body screamed to reach out, to acknowledge the young gorilla's curiosity. But she didn't. She knew that even the smallest wrong move could bring Koba's wrath upon her. The little gorilla let out a soft grunt, stepping even closer. And then, a sound, a deep, rumbling exhale. Koba. Lily tensed. The silverback had been watching the entire time. He took a slow step forward, his massive form casting a shadow over her. She could feel his presence looming over her. The heat of his breath just inches away. She didn't move. Another long breath from Koba, this time softer, less of a warning and more of an acknowledgement. Then, just as suddenly as he had approached, he turned away, disappearing into the jungle. Lily exhaled shakily, her pulse still racing. He had accepted her, just a little. It wasn't trust, not yet. But it was something. A fragile, unspoken beginning. Then, everything changed the night the storm came. The jungle was restless that evening. The sky, once golden with the setting sun, had darkened to a deep, churning gray. The thick humidity had shifted, replaced by a cool, unsettling stillness. The air felt electric, charged with the promise of an impending storm. Lily sat near the edge of the research camp, her eyes drifting toward the dense foliage where Koba's troop had settled for the night. The gorillas had grown uneasy, sensing the shift in the atmosphere long before the first rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon. Then, the sky split open. A flash of white lightning streaked through the clouds, followed almost instantly by a deafening clap of thunder. The jungle erupted into chaos. Birds shrieked and took flight. Tree branches swayed violently as the wind tore through the canopy. Lily grabbed her gear, shielding it from the sudden downpour. Rain hammered against the earth, turning the ground into a slick, muddy mess. She could barely see through the thick sheets of water, but through the storm's fury, she heard something else. A cry. It was sharp, panicked. A young gorilla. Lily's breath hitched. She turned toward the sound, her heart hammering. Through the rain, she saw movement. A small figure stumbling near the river's edge. One of the juveniles had strayed too far from the troop, its tiny hands slipping against the wet ground as it tried to scramble to safety. The river, normally calm and predictable, had transformed into a raging torrent, swollen from the sudden downpour. The current surged violently, dragging fallen branches and debris through its muddy waters. Another cry. Lily didn't hesitate. Her boots sank into the mud as she ran, rain pelting her skin, her clothes already soaked through. The little gorilla was slipping, its tiny fingers losing their grip on the slick, rain-soaked roots. One wrong move, and it would be swept away. Lily lunged forward, her hands grabbing onto a thick branch as she reached out. "Hold on!" she gasped, not expecting a response but willing the little creature to understand. Then, movement in the shadows. A massive figure burst through the rain. Koba. He moved like a force of nature, his powerful limbs propelling him forward with terrifying speed. He let out a deep, thunderous roar, one that shook Lily to her core. In an instant, he was there, gripping the young gorilla and yanking it back from the river's edge with effortless strength. The small one clung to him, trembling, its tiny fingers grasping onto his thick fur. Koba's massive chest heaved as he turned, his dark eyes locking onto Lily. For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain poured between them, the sound of the storm a deafening roar in their ears. Koba could have left. He could have ignored her, retreated back into the safety of the jungle with his troop. But he didn't. Instead, he did something Lily never expected. He reached out, not aggressively, not as a threat, but as something else, an offering, an acknowledgement. Lily swallowed hard, rain dripping from her hair, from her lashes. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out too. Her fingers brushed against his, just for a second. A single, fleeting moment of connection between two worlds that were never meant to meet. Then, as quickly as it happened, Koba turned, disappearing into the jungle with the young gorilla safe in his arms. Lily stood there, breathless, the storm raging around her, but inside, something had shifted. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was something more. She had earned his trust. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained. The jungle, once chaotic with wind and rain, now dripped with the aftermath, leaves heavy with water, the ground soft and slick with fresh mud. The air smelled of damp earth, of renewal. But for Lily, everything felt different. She sat near the research camp, her fingers tracing the damp fabric of her sleeves, replaying the night over and over in her mind. The weight of Koba's touch still lingered on her skin, not in fear, but in something else, something deeper. The way he had looked at her, the way he had chosen to acknowledge her instead of dismissing her like all the times before, it meant something. It wasn't just tolerance anymore. It was trust. The next morning, Lily ventured out into the jungle, her steps careful but confident. The sounds of the waking forest surrounded her, birds calling to each other in the treetops, the distant rustling of unseen creatures moving through the undergrowth. But she was looking for one thing, one presence. And then, there he was. Koba sat beneath a broad tree, his massive form still, watching. The morning light cast golden streaks through the canopy, catching the hints of silver in his dark fur. He was regal, powerful, yet calm. He wasn't just tolerating her presence anymore, he was accepting it. She slowly lowered herself onto the ground, mirroring the way the other gorillas rested. She didn't move closer. She didn't need to. It was enough just to be here, to exist in his space without fear. The other gorillas lingered nearby, some casting curious glances, others resuming their routines. But none of them tried to push her away. Then, something Lily never expected happened. Koba shifted his weight. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached down, plucked a handful of leaves, and began chewing. A simple act, a normal one. But when his deep, intelligent eyes flicked toward her and he pushed a small cluster of leaves in her direction, Lily felt her breath hitch. A gift, a gesture of inclusion. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached forward, accepting the offering. She didn't eat, not yet. She only held it, letting the moment settle between them. And then, Koba exhaled, a low, steady sound. Not a warning, not a challenge, but something else. Approval. Lily's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. She mimicked his movements, chewing a small piece of the leaves, respecting the ritual. She had spent weeks, months proving herself, learning his world. And now, finally, he had invited her in. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was one of them. The days that followed felt different, as if an invisible boundary had finally been lifted. Lily was no longer just an observer, a foreign presence tolerated at a distance. She was accepted. The gorillas no longer moved away when she approached. They no longer watched her with wary eyes. And Koba, He no longer tested her with displays of dominance. Instead, he watched her with something else, something she couldn't quite name. She spent her mornings among them, moving as they did, sitting quietly as they groomed one another, eating when they ate. She didn't try to force interactions, and that made all the difference. The younger gorillas had grown bold around her, coming closer, sometimes tugging at her sleeves or curiously patting her hands. Even the females, once indifferent, had begun to acknowledge her. But it was Koba who fascinated her the most. He was unlike any animal she had ever encountered. His intelligence was staggering, his presence commanding. Yet there was something deeper beneath his powerful exterior, a quiet understanding, a soulfulness in his eyes that made her wonder, how much did he truly see? One afternoon, as the gorillas lounged in the sun, Lily sat nearby, sketching in her notebook. She had been documenting their behaviors for weeks, but today, her pencil moved differently. She wasn't just recording data. She was capturing him. Koba. The way the light caught the silver streaks in his fur, the way his massive hands rested on his knees, the way his eyes seemed to look right through her. She was so focused that she didn't notice him watching. A soft grunt pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up, and there he was, closer than usual. His dark eyes flicked to her notebook, then back to her face. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, to her astonishment, he reached out, not aggressively, not as a test, but with quiet curiosity. His massive fingers, rough and powerful, brushed against the edge of the pages, as if trying to understand what she was doing. Lily held her breath, allowing him to explore, her pulse hammering in her ears. And then, he did something extraordinary. Koba, the mighty silverback, the king of the jungle, looked at her drawing, and then, with deliberate slowness, he touched his own chest. Lily's breath caught. He knew. He understood. A wave of emotion crashed over her, unexpected and overwhelming. She had spent so much time trying to understand him, trying to prove herself to him. But in this moment, she realized he had been doing the same, watching her, learning her. This wasn't just acceptance. This was something more, something deeper, something that neither of them could put into words, but both of them could feel.